When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands. Then, lower-cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IPWorksWonders.
When the White House froze the government's credit cards, it really gummed up the works. The long-running purchase card program has saved untold billions of paperwork hours and saved the government billions of dollars. Here to inject some rational thinking about card usage, longtime federal contracting officer and now a consultant, Shawna Weatherly. Ms. Weatherly, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here.
And more than a CO, you oversaw a lot of the work that resulted in how credit cards are used by federal agencies, correct?
Yeah. Actually, for about 6 years, I worked on the card program at the government level and actually wrote the current contracts that we see being used in government today for the purchase, travel, and fleet card system.
Right. And in one of your posts, you noted how back as late as the early 90s, there were still cages with safes in them for cash management and checking cash in and out of drawers with paper receipts.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I was one of those impressed fund cashiers who used to go in and grab cash every time somebody needed a trip to the hardware store or some sort of office supply that we didn't have on readily available in the logistics group. So yes, that was very much a thing.
And people looking at the credit card program from the outside often, and there are cases of abuse, they come up from time to time, but maybe have the misconception that there is no oversight or no controls built into the use of cards, so people can go to casinos and fly first class or buy a new Escalade or something on a government credit card. But it's a little bit more under control than that, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, at the first level, there's what we call merchant category code blocks, where the bank and the government decide what categories of businesses are blocked from being able to accept the card. That's the first line of defense. And then we have an approving official defense that comes in with every transaction as a review of every statement is done every month. And then there's at every agency an organization program coordinator that reviews all the transactions in an audit basis. And then the banks and even Visa and MasterCard have their own layers of fraud analytics and data management tools that are used that automatically flag questionable transactions.
So credit cards used by the government probably have a unique series of numbers assigned to them that other commercial entities would never have, or private card holders?
Correct. They do, so that we can identify them as government cards, even if they're not marked as such on the face of the card.
And from what you've been observing as a consultant to small businesses, but knowing the federal system, what have been the practical effects of this freeze or this $1 limit, this kind of thing? And is it still in place as far as we know?
Yes, it's still in place, and actually accounts are being closed on an almost daily basis for what is believed to be no use on those cards. What's actually occurring is that small parks and lakes, small offices that are, not in the Beltway, not near a contracting office, are struggling to get purchased what they need in terms of small things, like maybe a toilet breaks at a construction field office and it's the only one and they need somebody to come in and fix it today, or there's a leak in a roof of a government contracting facility that's maybe a field office and they need somebody to come in. Little things like that. Small purchases just cannot get done. And it's also, impacting the little economies in those areas because those cards are used in the local economy.
And what's the alternative? Say, if you're a remote National Park Service office in a cabin somewhere and you need a new chair and a couple of boxes of flares to sign people's passports.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is really going back to whoever your cognizant contracting office is, putting in a purchase request and waiting for it to, go through the process. And that's not a cheap or, short process. It can take, a couple of weeks. And we're talking about a cost to the government in terms of administrative costs, anywhere from $500 to $1,200 to process each of those.
And I imagine from the contracting officer standpoint, that's the last thing they want is that kind of paperwork or online work, whatever it is, hours, cycles for little tiny purchases.
Yeah, it just clogs up the system. And these are low risk purchases, and it can dramatically impact the workload in an office where more critical, high visibility, or more public facing type of purchases need to be made quickly and more streamlined.
We were speaking with Shawna Weatherly. She spent 25 years in federal procurement. Now she's president of Federal Subcontract Solutions. And before all this DOGE stuff, the trend was, I guess people thinking about this, was to expand the use of these cards to pay for contracts of increasingly larger size, dollar-wise, because of the benefits in rebates that the government gets.
Yes, absolutely. That's how these contracts are put into place. Is these banks actually propose refunds back to the government. So how much money is the government going to get back in terms of the use as the money flows through the cards? That's one of the things that I think is getting lost in some of this is that piece of this is a program that pays for itself through the use of and the gaining of refunds.
So how is that word getting to the DOGE people, or is anybody that you know of in contact with them and saying, hey, look, guys, you're shooting yourselves in the foot here?
Yeah, I know that both the associations, MasterCard and Visa, I know the banks are talking to them. Even internally, the Smart Pay group, that is the government-wide group at GSA, are in close contact with them. But the influence they have may vary.
And what are your recommendations, again, having been a contracting officer and a contracting supervisor, what do you think should, aside from the DOGE business and restoring things to how they were a few weeks ago, what should the next round of development be in the purchase card program for the government?
Well, I think the government has been using the plastic hard cards for a long time. I think that should evolve into more virtual cards and more use of electronic payment types that the banks can set that up from business to government to do, especially for recurring purchases, let's say utilities, phones, things like that. Also, what I've been a proponent of is really pushing for the use of the cards as more of a payment mechanism to make contract payments with. I know Emily Murphy has talked about paying up to $1 million. I'm a real big proponent of making sure that at least up to $250,000, the simplified acquisition range there, is used for the cards, because that helps small businesses. It helps them bring in cash flow. It helps them have cash reserves, helps them get better rates on their credit, and it helps get them to the next opportunity. And we do have some rules out there that require us to accelerate payments to small businesses. So that would be a big, helpful tool to do that.
And functionally, could you see, say, a phone storing a card as people do in their regular lives? I just recharged my Metro card with the card of credit stored on the phone, so it's internal to the device, the whole process. Could that happen coupled with mobile access to those common items that are used for small purchases, or even to a particular contract that could be stored virtually on a mobile device, and the whole thing takes place in the user's phone with whatever security measures need to be in place and accountability measures?
Yeah, absolutely, especially on government-issued mobile devices. I see there's no reason for having that there with the controls that are in place right now.
All right, and any particular agencies ahead on this that are more forward-thinking than some of the others?
Yeah, actually, Architect of the Capitol, Capitol Police, HHS has been moving forward. DHS has done some really good things. So I think those four I see have been some of the forethinkers in this. And have been working very hard, myself and through some of the associations, to bring those case studies forward so the rest of government understands that it's doable and very easy and can streamline not only the purchase process, but even the reconciliation process on the back end, where you're verifying those purchases are accurate and for official use.
And you mentioned two agencies of the congressional branch. That's kind of interesting also.